Shot clock at 6. Castle on him now. Brunson, stutter dribble, drives inside, goes up, floaters up. It's good! The Knicks take the lead with 1:22 remaining. Brunson on the drive, the floater's up. Shot won't go, rebound deflected in the backcourt. Fox has a chance to get it. Fox has it inside, blocked by Anunoby. 9 seconds remaining.
Just go flat for Jalen Brunson, allow him to operate at the top, 1-on-1.
Brunson gets it, fires up a 3. Shot no good, the tip, it's gone! It's gone! It's gone! With 1.2 remaining, Knicks take the lead. OG Anunoby, and it's 107-106. Bedlam here at the Garden. They can't believe it.
Was off yesterday, not intentionally. All drugged up today, feeling great, Max. Feeling really, really good today. Woo! Steroids, they work, and they work quickly. Good morning, everybody. The World Cup's underway. I watched Mexico beat their opponent yesterday 2-0, South Africa. And then late last night, flipped on to FS1 to watch South Korea beat the Czech Republic, a.k.a. Czechia or Czechia. We've got not a lot of World Cup on the show today, although hopefully a guest will come through for somebody that we had on multiple times during the last World Cup, and he was great. U.S. and tonight, Paraguay at SoFi. It's not even sold out for the U.S.'s first World Cup game. But the U.S. is a slight favorite, and the U.S. is favored to get out of their group and advance to the round of 32. This is the first World Cup of 48 teams. You're going to be surprised as we go through the next 5 weeks how much I'm paying attention to the World Cup. Not just because, if I haven't mentioned this, I think I have, I am going to be going to the World Cup final, but because in recent World Cups, I've gotten into it. I think the excitement of it, the pageantry of it, the importance to the rest of the world is fascinating. The game itself, still hard for me to do, but I'm getting a more of an understanding of what's going on when they advance the ball upfield and then they turn around and then they kick it all the way back to their own goalie. That gets a little frustrating. But I guess there is a method to some of that madness, and it is underway in North America. The first 2 games were in Mexico, and then we get a game tonight in, I believe, Toronto, or this afternoon in Toronto, and then tonight the first one in the U.S. Will be interesting to follow. Look, I mean, once these NBA finals are over, once this Stanley Cup, which is proving to be one of the better played Stanley Cup finals in years, Carolina last night taking a 3-2 series lead, even though Tortorella, the coach of Vegas, guaranteed that they would be back in Raleigh for a 7th and deciding game. We'll see. But all of these games have been incredibly certainly competitive. We do have a baseball team that needs monitoring. God, that was painful on Wednesday, blowing a 9-1 lead going into the 8th inning. Wow. But I'll tell you what, the overall from the Nats, certainly way ahead of what the expectations were, and had a very good chance when they were up 9-1 to sweep the Giants. They've got a very tough series at home starting tonight against Seattle, who right now is the American League West leader by a game over Texas. So a big series coming up for the Nats. I did not have a chance to weigh in on NBA Finals Game 4 because I was out yesterday, and I want to do that here to start. But I also want to mention coming up this hour something Carnell Tate, the wide receiver who was picked number 4 overall by the Tennessee Titans, something he said on Amon-Ra St. Brown's podcast yesterday is interesting. And it, of course, deals with our team. So, Game 4, wow, what a basketball game on Wednesday night. The biggest comeback in the history of the NBA Finals. the biggest comeback from a deficit of 27 or more at halftime in the history of the playoffs. They got outscored 76-49 in the first half, and then they outscored San Antonio 58-30 in the second half. San Antonio scored 76 in the first half, 30 in the second half. It's the most points and the fewest points as a follow-up in NBA postseason. Actually, in NBA history, no team has ever scored 76 or more in a first half and scored as few as 30 in the second half of an NBA game, playoff or regular season. So I want to start with the two takeaways that I think are at odds. I'm glad I'm doing this. I'm not glad I'm doing this today. I would have preferred to have done it yesterday, but it gave me some perspective in terms of what everyone was talking about. Usually I'm not totally in tune with what everyone else is saying, especially when there's that quick of a turnaround. But I did watch and read a lot yesterday about this game, which, by the way, some people are saying will go down as the all-time New York sports moment. Really? First of all, the Anunoby tip was great, but it's not like we haven't seen tips like that. I think the comeback overall is kind of the moment. But, man, New York, they've had a lot of moments, a lot of moments. And they have not won the series yet. I think you got to win the series. And they're up 3-1. And I think they're going to win the series. So there were two takeaways that I had. And there's something that Max is going to play for me that I actually have not heard yet. And it's the De'Aaron Fox explanation as to why, with 13 seconds to go after chasing down the loose ball, after the Knick possession went badly, why he shot the ball instead of picked it up and dribbled it, in an attempt to dribble the clock out. Before I hear what he said, I want to mention what I thought about just the very harsh criticism of what would have been, what everybody described as a low IQ, not understanding clock, not understanding time, management, etc. For, by the way, the veteran on their team. De'Aaron Fox is a 28-year-old point guard. He's grandpa on the Spurs. So I have a slightly different take. I do think that the preference, of course, would have been him to chase down the ball, grab the ball, and then try to escape Anunoby and anybody else that was trailing on the play, and try to get 3, 4, 5 seconds dribbled off the clock before he gets fouled. There's 13 seconds left. It's certainly not going to end the game trying to dribble the clock out. He's going to have to knock down those 2 free throws to give them a 3-point lead because they were up 1. Let me just say up front, that to me would have obviously been the preference. But I didn't think about it in the moment. And you guys know me. I'm such a believer that I could clock manage over half the coaches in basketball and football, which probably isn't true. Although I think I could do it better than some of them do it. But I didn't think of it immediately. And I saw, by the way, that the announcing crew got criticized for not mentioning it. I didn't think about it in the moment because of this. De'Aaron Fox was chasing down a loose ball, had tremendous forward momentum, and he caught up with the ball basically at the rim. The natural thing to do in that moment is to finish it off with a layup. Anybody that's ever played basketball at any level, there's a loose ball and you're ahead of the pack, and you pick it up, layup, right? And I think that was a natural reaction because his forward momentum was taking him into not only the rim, but the correct side of the rim for him, a left-hander, to lay it up off the glass and score. Of course, Anunoby makes a great play. As important as his tip was that block, and it was a great play. And Anunoby right now, I said after game 2 that Karl Anthony Towns is trending towards the MVP. Well, Anunoby for me now is trending towards the MVP, but we've got more basketball to go. Who knows? Brunson, by the way, is the favorite still. He is the slight favorite. And I did like the way the Knicks played the other night versus game 3, because the ball did end up moving much more than it had the previous night. I mean, Brunson had 7 assists in the game and 3 turnovers versus what he had in Game 3, which was 5 assists and 5 turnovers. That is a statistical reflection of better basketball. It was better basketball, even though it was dreadful in the first half in terms of shooting and everything else, defense, etc. But I did not and will not kill De'Aaron Fox for trying to lay that ball in. I think it would have been hard to stop, gather, and then be able to get away to burn enough clock to make the juice worth the squeeze. It would have been the preference. It would have been the preference. But I kind of understood why he went and shot that. It was a natural thing based on the sprint to the ball, the forward momentum, and him being right there at the rim. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. By the way, he was terrible in the game. The throwaway to Hart was such a bad he had so many bad turnovers, kicking it, dribbling it off his foot. The throwaway to Hart where Hart missed the layup on that other end, which would have given the Knicks a lead. The first lead in that comeback. Actually, no, they had one once before, I think. But he was terrible in the game. But I'm not killing him as much for that as I think, the basketball world is. And then the other big takeaway for me is a continuation of the conversation from the other day, and that is a conversation about Victor Wembanyama. Man, there was a lot of yapping from Wembanyama. A lot of I'm in your head, pointing to his head, looking at Mitchell Robinson in particular after he had the flagrant. By the way, the flagrant that was called on Wembanyama for the elbow to Karl Anthony Towns, I actually thought that was less egregious and less advertent, intentional than the play against Brunson the other night. That aside, man, there was a lot of yapping from Victor Wembanyama when they were up 29, when they're up 25. And he's really a trash talker. Hey, it's a lot of great players have been trash talkers. Larry Bird, one of the all-time best. Jordan, we can go down the list. He hasn't accomplished anything at this point. That may be part of what my, emotional reaction to watching him is. I'm not a big fan of him believing that he's essentially a 2-guard or a small forward more than a big man. My preference, if I were a Spurs fan, would be there's no human being right now in the NBA that could stop you if you catch the ball, 7 feet or closer to the basket. So why don't we do a lot more of that rather than watch you try to be Kevin Durant a lot? But man, there was a lot of trash talking, yapping. I'm in your head. This thing is done. And then invisible down the stretch. Invisible. And then he misses free throws, and he's a good free throw shooter. He choked on those 2 free throws. He was 1 for 4 over his final 4 free throws. And he didn't knock down crucial free throws. Castle did. He didn't. And I'm going to defend him a little bit because he was gassed. I don't think that he was cowering from the moment like, say, LeBron did in his first, NBA Finals with the Heat against Dallas when he literally didn't want the basketball in games 3, 4, and 5. Game 3 in particular, I'll never forget that. I'm like, oh my God, LeBron James is terrified. That's not how I would describe Victor Wembanyama down the stretch. I thought he was gassed. I thought he was exhausted. But he certainly was not trying to do something to finish off the Knicks and stop and thwart their comeback by getting his 7'5", Scott told me on the show the other day, he goes, there's no way he's 7'4". He's not even 7'5". He's at least a half foot taller than Karl Anthony Towns, and Karl Anthony Towns is 7 feet. He might be 7'6" at this point. He did nothing. Invisible. But again, I don't think it was because he was scared. I don't think this dude scares. I mean, I like that part of him. I think it's because Mitch Johnson played him 44 minutes. What are you doing? Why is he in the game 44 minutes where for most of the game, you not only have a double-digit lead, you've got a high double-digit lead. You're in the 20s for much of it. Why is he on the floor for 44 minutes? If you've watched Wembanyama during this postseason, there have been moments where he gets gassed, he gets tired, and at that point, he is not super effective. So I put it as much on the coach for playing him too much when there were ample opportunities to rest him. So, but man, that was a lot of talking. There was a lot of yapping, a lot of, trying to show up the opposition with the big lead, and then nothing from him down the stretch except for bad moments like the 3 missed free throws and the 2 big ones that he missed late. 9 of 25 from the floor, shooting 8 threes. Look, the game was – no one comes back in basketball from 29 down where it's just about the team that made the comeback. The team that's got the lead has to participate, almost always, has to. And the Spurs totally participated in their own demise. There was a stretch there in the third quarter where they shot 8 straight threes, and the average time left on the shot clock when they shot the threes, 11 and a half seconds. What are you doing? Like, they thought it was so over. By the way, so did I. I never thought, even when the Knicks got it down to 9 and 99-90, and then I just didn't think they were going to do it. It just was too much to overcome. You see that all the time. They got it to within 10. They were down 35. They got it to within 10 or whatever. But it just never happens because they just run out of gas, run out of steam. The irony is the Spurs were running out of steam. Wembanyama was running out of steam. Terrible job by Mitch Johnson in terms of playing his big guy that much with that big of a lead. He should have been resting. By the way, he should have been resting for game 5. Now, I know there was, the extra day with the travel. But when they had the big lead, there should have been some thought given to, not necessarily game 5. That's probably too much. But certainly we're going to make sure he's fresh for the fourth quarter in the event the game gets to, within striking distance. But 8 straight threes, average time left on the shot clock, 11 seconds. I mean, you'd have been better off on those 8 possessions burning another 80 seconds, 10 seconds off, and firing up crazy wild shots, with 1 second left on the shot clock than doing what they were doing. They totally treated the game as if it were completely over. And why in God's name does Dylan Harper not play more of the crunch time moments in the fourth quarter? This is the second game in the series. Game 1, same thing. I mean, he and Castle, you could argue in this series are their 2 best players, or certainly tied with Wembanyama. So the Knicks go to 3-1 up, and they should win this series. But, every single game, all 4 games, all 4 of them, the loser had the game almost in hand at some point during the game. So I'm not, if the Spurs are able to win at home, a lot of pressure to close out the series in 6 at Madison Square Garden. The scene was amazing. I can't look. I'm not a New York sports historian by a long shot. I mean, I'm certainly very familiar with David Tyree's catch. I'm certainly familiar with, the Willis Reed moment when he comes out for Game 7. Aaron Boone, although they didn't win the World Series. Bobby Thompson, Tommy told me, look, Bobby Thompson's home run to beat the Dodgers in a playoff in 51. The famous call, Giants win the pennant, Giants win the pennant, Giants win the pennant. He's like, that's got to be near the top of the list. But I don't know how, you don't remember this, but I don't think it's an all-time moment unless they actually win the series. Like, we'll remember the 29-point comeback, the biggest comeback in NBA playoff history, finals history. We'll remember that part of it. The Anunoby tip was a phenomenal play. By the way, I did not have a problem at all with the Spurs doubling Brunson. I just wouldn't have used Wembanyama to double Brunson. You want Wembanyama back near the rim. I also didn't have a problem at all with the shot that Brunson took. It was deep, but there were 5.7 seconds on the inbounds. Here comes the double. If he makes a pass, to whomever, I forget who got freed up. Well, I guess it was Anunoby in that spot. Are you going to get as good a shot? Maybe. I don't know. I didn't have a problem with him. He makes that shot. He had the space to get it off. And obviously you had the chance for the follow-up without Wembanyama near the rim. Bad night for Mitch Johnson. We've seen a couple of really bad nights for coaches. Kenny Atkinson for sure in game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Knicks. That was an embarrassing moment for him. And then the conversation about analytically they should be up in the series, all of that. And then Mitch Johnson, look, I was thinking about this right when the game ended. If you're doing what I do in San Antonio, I would imagine that Greg Popovich's name got mentioned once or 15 times. Like, we never lose that game with Pop. They probably wouldn't have, because Mitch Johnson was a part of it. But it wasn't just one person. It wasn't just De'Aaron Fox. It wasn't just Mitch Johnson. Mitch Johnson, as the head coach, had an opportunity to, hey, wait a minute, what are we doing here? We're up 23 or whatever. Just pick a number in the third quarter. Let's maybe stop firing up the threes so early in the shot clock. I don't want to start milking the game right now, but since we've missed our last 4 or 5, maybe let's go inside to the guy that we have that's bigger and taller than anybody else, and let's try to get him to the free throw line more than 7 times in the game down the stretch. Just a lot of stuff that seems like, look, I can only imagine you're up 29, 27 at the half. Even as a head coach, you're like, okay. But God, once they start to make some of those moves, crazy, crazy basketball game. Highly entertaining NBA Finals. Come on, man. Even if you hate the NBA. And I don't like the regular season. We've talked about this forever. But the NBA playoffs are truly entertaining. They are intense. They are physical. They are the best of pro sports in our country. I mean, it is these 4 games and the intensity around these 4 games. And now what happens in game 5? I don't know. Does a team feel the sting in the carryover to the next game when you blow a 29-point lead? Because let's face it, had they taken the 2 games in New York, they'd be a heavy favorite right now to win the series. And they were on the verge of doing that. Oh, I wanted to mention one other thing. Karl Anthony Towns, because of the early foul trouble in part, just did not have a great basketball game, but he made a great play on that final possession. 1.2 left, 107-106, and the Spurs ran a really good play. Wembanyama, a back screen for Castle. And if that pass is a good pass and it isn't tipped, which is what Karl Anthony Towns does, and that's up at the rim, that is a gut punch game winner at the rim for Castle, because he was open off that back screen. I don't know why the Knicks didn't switch. Almost in any basketball situation, under 5 seconds, typically, you switch every screen, because you can't be in a bad matchup if there are 2 seconds left on a clock. It's not like somebody's going to be able to take advantage of, they switched into a bad matchup, so now we can work on this matchup. No, there's just too little time. And they didn't switch that back screen, and he was open. But Karl Anthony Towns tipped the inbounds, and the game ended. That was a great play by him at the end. All right. I want to get to, I'll tell you what, 301-230-0980. We'll get to Carnell Tate coming up, but 301-230-0980, because I didn't have a chance to do this yesterday. I think my two big takeaways, and from you basketball people out there, I want to hear what you thought. My two big ones were I can kill De'Aaron Fox for his play overall, especially in the second half. He was terrible. As the oldest guy and as grandpa on the team and as a point guard, you got to control the game. You got to make better decisions. I kind of understand why he shot when he shot. Wouldn't have been the preference, but it's hard for me to really kill him for that. And then secondly, Victor Wembanyama, man, I don't know, irritating. You talk as much as you did. You point to your head. I'm in your head. I'm in your head. You better finish them off. And he was invisible down the stretch until he wasn't, missing those crucial free throws. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Our phone lines are open for NBA Finals talk. I was out yesterday, just gave you thoughts on the incredible Game 4. Certainly an all-time memorable NBA Finals game. There's a long list of NBA Finals games that I'd probably put in front of it. We talked just last week about the 50-year anniversary of the greatest NBA Finals game ever played, probably the greatest NBA playoff game ever played, and that was the Phoenix-Boston Game 5 in 1976, the triple overtime, just insanity game. I would urge anybody that's just interested at all in one of the all-time complete unadulterated bedlam, insanity from fans, referees getting punched out. I mean, the whole thing was just surreal, but they had the 50-year anniversary of that. A lot of articles written last week about that game. I mean, Jordan over Russell, come on, in the final game of his career. We got a lot of them over the years. Certainly the comeback was all time. Although it's interesting that in the NBA, if you watch the NBA enough, you know that like no lead ever seems safe, especially in the regular season. But this was obviously all-time, 27-point halftime lead, all-time for the playoffs, 29-point lead in the third quarter, the biggest in NBA Finals history. And again, for me, like there were two major takeaways and a lot of smaller takeaways, but I mentioned that De'Aaron Fox was not good in the game. He was terrible. And I certainly felt like the preference would have been with 13 seconds to go to gather the ball and figure out a way to dribble off 3 or 4 more seconds before getting fouled. But I kind of understood because of the sprint to the ball and where he gathered it right at the rim, why naturally he went up and shot it, and how it may have been easier than gathering, stopping, and being able to burn enough time off the clock before shooting 2 free throws to make sort of the juice worth the squeeze. And then the other one is this. I mean, Victor Wembanyama, don't get me wrong, man. I mean, the guy's, he's going to be an all-time great. I get that. But when you trash talk as much as he did in the first half of that game, even into the third quarter, and you're, pointing to your head, I'm in your head, I've gotten into your head. Now we're about to even this series up, take home court advantage back, and probably wipe you guys out the next 2 games. You better be there at the end to make sure that you can back up all of the talking. We talked the other day, I think there's certainly a dirty nature to Wembanyama's game. And I did not think that the elbow that he got hit with a flagrant on, he's now 1 flagrant point away. It doesn't have to be a flagrant 2. A flagrant 1, he is suspended from the next game. So, imagine like they're up 25 in the fourth quarter and they hold on to the lead, but he gets chippy and throws an elbow at somebody and he's out for game 6. He's got to control his emotions on the court. But when you talk as much as he did on the way to a 29-point lead, you can't disappear from the game when the Knicks are making the comeback. And he made 1 of 4 free throws down the stretch, including missing 2 in one sitting at the very end that were crucial towards the outcome. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I'll also just say overall, man, the drama, the back and forth, it's been this way really in the Western Conference. Eastern Conference, not as much, although early on the Boston-Philly series was nuts. But man, these playoffs have been sensational, and these finals have had a lot of drama associated with it. Let me just mention that Window Nation has right now their buy 4, get 4 free sale going on between now and the end of the month. If you've been thinking about new windows, give them a call at 866-90Nation or go to windownation.com and get them out to your house for a free in-home estimate. It'll take an hour or less. You'll actually get a chance to find out which windows in your home need to be replaced. And then if you decide to move forward with them, you're paying half price on the windows, and you don't have to pay anything until the year 2028. 2 years of no down payment, no monthly payments, and no interest on your purchase. 866-90-NATION. WindowNation.com. Mention my name. I promise you it'll work out for you. It always does. Forbes magazine ranked Window Nation #1 among all window installation companies in America. All right, thoughts on the NBA Finals? Maybe something that I said about Game 4. Let's start with our guy Joe in Springfield. Joe, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, how are you? Glad to have you back.
Hey, Joe.
I would say that, I agree with you that I think that the flagrant one, I believe, is definitely right on Wemby. And I have to say, that fueled the Knicks because earlier in the game, Mitchell Robinson was getting frustrated with Wemby because he was getting a toss with him. When Mitchell Robinson threw an elbow intentionally at Wemby, he got called for the flagrant. But when Wemby got that flagrant one, I believe the Knicks were like, okay, enough is enough. We're done. We're tired of Wemby doing this to us. And that fueled them. And Wemby, for some reason, was Tony saying, hey, I can do anything I want. And guess what, Wemby? You didn't back it up. You couldn't even finish down the stretch. And, Kevin, I do have to say that the OG Anunoby layup, which got the Garden to a frenzy, that definitely tops the list of best moments in MSG. Because remember the Larry Johnson 4-point play back in 1999 where the guard went crazy?
Yep.
That layup by Anunoby on Wednesday night tops the Larry Johnson 4-point play. Now, whether it's
the tip in, yeah. Look, it was incredible, and it capped off the comeback, and it put him in position to win. There was one more possession. I kept thinking, by the way, before that last inbounds, can you imagine the gut punch if San Antonio throws in a game winner after that play? And I'm telling you, Castle was open on the back screen, on the Wemby back screen, and Karl Anthony Towns made a great play tipping the inbounds pass. But yeah, I know that if they go on to win this series, it's going to be considered an all-time great New York sports moment. But I think the moment was, the tip-in, we've seen tip-ins before, and it was, he rose above everybody else, and it was a fabulous tip-in. And Wemby should have been back in the paint, not doubling. He shouldn't have been the player doubling Brunson. But it's the comeback overall that's part of the moment. Down 29, coming back to win Game 4 of the 2026 NBA Finals. Anunoby with the tip-in. It's kind of the combined thing for me. Thanks, Joe, for the call. Let's go to JYD, Junkyard Dog. Go ahead, man.
Hey, what's up, Kevin?
What's up, JYD?
Pretty much just sitting back enjoying life. That's trying to do the best they can. When I look at the whole series, the New York coach has strategically done a marvelous job with the Knicks, because they played one way for the first half of the season. And then it almost seems like they had a whole new training camp and they started playing differently, and when they went on this run and through the playoffs or whatever, and how they moved the ball and all that. And he brought some of like a Golden State type offense that they were using. But now he did another strategic thing the other night.
He played Alvarado and he played Brunson together, which I mentioned on Wednesday's show. On Wednesday's show.
Right, to get, and he did that simply to take some of the pressure off of Brunson, having to have to handle the ball all the time.
Right.
And he also did it because he got more speed out there in the backcourt and to get more possessions.
With Scott, when Scott was on the other day, I said, I'd like to see what it would look like with Alvarado and Brunson together in the backcourt. And I think Scott said, well, what are you going to do defensively? I'm like, well, that's a great point. Understood. But, Monday night, it was so stagnant, and Alvarado plays completely differently than Brunson. And by the way, fearless dude at 6 feet. I think more than anybody else, he's probably challenged Wembanyama at the rim as much as anybody else has. And I just thought getting somebody to take the ball handling responsibilities that Brunson has away from him and then spaces the floor, the pace I thought would be better. I'm shocked that Mike Brown did it, but I thought it paid off for them for sure. I think it was a really good move. I didn't know what it would look like. I just thought it'd be interesting to see those two together in the backcourt.
And then you have to look at Wemby. Wemby, people keep saying, what is Wemby is not going to ever measure up until he finds out what does he want to be. Do you want to be? Well, the organization also has to make this decision. Are you going to be a small forward, or are you
going to be a center? But I know what you're saying, JYD, and I totally know where you're going with this, and we've talked about it a little bit the last couple of days. Thanks for the call as always. I think that the ideal thing for Wemby, 4 or 5 years from now, would be if the game calls for him to dominate it from the post, he can do that. If the game calls for him to be dominant from the post, but also, dominant from the perimeter, he can do that. I don't think that a game should ever call for 7'5" or 7'6", Victor Wembanyama to be a 2-guard or a small forward, where basically much of his activity is out on the perimeter offensively. That I can't get down with, even though he is skilled and he can shoot it, but you got to have kind of the ability to do both and call on both. But calling on just Victor Wembanyama to be a perimeter offensive player seems nuts to me. Ian, go ahead.
Beatrice would often say more games are lost than won. And I think this is a great example of it. It's one thing if the Knicks were playing incredible basketball and just hitting every shot. But for them, the Spurs to take 8 3-pointers in a row was malpractice. And you've heard every commentator, every analyst, every former player just reiterate that point over and over and over again. And to me, when you do the blame pie, a lot is on Wemby, the missed free throws, et cetera. And the coach is young, et cetera. The adult in the room was supposed to be De'Aaron Fox. And I kind of think if they had Chris Paul like they did last year, or a more veteran stabilizing point guard to match such a young team, Harper, Castle, Wemby, Michelle, et cetera, you would have seen an ability to slow that down. But I still
to be able to make the decision on the floor without the coach's direction. Yes. And you know what? You nailed it. Like Chris Paul would have felt what the game needed in that spot. I think that's the guy. Like, if he were still on that roster, it would have been interesting to have a true veteran, massive IQ player on the floor, because I don't know that they have one right now.
Yeah, and again, I thought that would have been Fox. But the other thing I'll say is I still feel pretty confident that the Spurs can win this in 7. And the reason I feel that is I would say of the games the Spurs have lost, in every single one of them, you could make arguments that they should have won each of them.
I know.
It could be over the other way. And I feel like the Spurs,
it could also be over in 4, with the Knicks being on top.
Yes, it could. And that's what, it's like an NFL season. Each game is a standalone entity.
They are.
I do feel like game 5 will go very heavy Spurs, and then the pressure's on New York in game 6. It'll be interesting, but I still think over time the Spurs can do it. But I mean, that is as shocking a result as you could ever imagine.
I'm just curious because we've all gotten to know Ian a little bit over the years, and he is a bit of an irritant at times. And I know how much you do like. You're a big Victor Wembanyama fan, correct?
Yes.
So do you agree with me that A, he's a bit dirty, and B, the yapping the other night was a bit much considering he couldn't back it up?
Yes, on both.
So are you chalking it up to just immaturity, which I think is a fine answer, or is this who he's going to be?
I think it's immaturity and a little bit of trying too hard. I think he feels the pressure to be kind of a bigger personality than he is. And it takes a lot in life to be a true villain. And I don't think that's his DNA. And I think the more he talks and the more he kind of acts this way, the more of a pretender he looks like. And so for me, I am a fan of Wembanyama, but I can fully recognize how foolish and delusional and ridiculous he looks. If I was a coach or a veteran player, I'd be like, you look soft by doing this. I mean,
well, I don't think I think it's immaturity, but if it continues, there is a bit of poser in there. There's no doubt, especially if he's not able to back it up. And I expect that he's going to back it up many times over the next 10 years of our NBA playoff watching lives. But right now, in the moment, he's turned himself into a bit of a villain. Thank you, Ian. Let's go to Paulie. Paulie, go ahead.
Hell to the W. Big guy, how you doing, man?
What's up?
Orange and blue skies out here.
It's hot.
Listen, I'm going to say this. I know it seems people like to talk about the Spurs and the collapse, but I look at it as, I disagree with Aaron just said. The Knicks won that game. And I say that, of course, I'm a fan, but this is the second time they did this in the playoffs, in consecutive series.
The Cleveland game one, yeah.
Cleveland game one, right. But if you look at it, everybody complaining they took 8 straight three-pointers. Well, that's how they got the lead.
I understand that, Paulie. I understand that. But this isn't the regular season. You can't take those threes as early as they took those threes when you can do it 2 or 3 times to see if it's continuing. 8 straight times is not understanding, hey guys, if we're going to take those, let's not take them with 11 seconds left on the shot clock. We should be shortening the game, not extending the game with the big lead. And that's the big, that's the easiest way to put it. They extended a game that could have been shortened.
The pressure. They was feeling the pressure of the games because the Knicks was hitting shots. Jose Alvarado was a big part of that game. And not just, because of his physicality. Like you said, Wemby's becoming kind of a poser. Well, the wild Puerto Rican put him in his place. That's what.
Yeah.
They sicked the wild Puerto Rican on him, and they put him in his place. And that was, to me, him dumping Wemby on the floor was the turning point of their game.
Yeah.
Like, so we started.
I thought Cat's 2 fouls in 90 seconds was the turning point early.
No, man, that was the direction of the game, and it sucked the life out of the arena. It sucked the life out of the Knicks because it was almost like a continuation of what had happened in Game 3.
Yeah.
As far as the whole refereeing thing going. So, but I'm telling you, Alvarado was the MVP of that game. Brunson and OG, they did the best version of Batman and Robin. But Alvarado's energy, that's why they call him GTA. His energy and his physicality was the turning point of that game, man. So I'm gonna tip my cap to him, Mike Brown, and all that. Listen, I don't see how the Spurs can win. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm a Knicks fan, but it's just like Cleveland. You got a team.
Well, game one's complete, but Cleveland has a bunch of, all due respect, quitters on their team to begin with, starting with Harden. I don't see that in Castle. I don't see that in Harper. So you may be right. Like,
listen,
to me,
you see the talent, but that's the type of loss that'll break your will.
We'll see. You might be right, but Big Tony, but Paulie, They've got to take it to them early because I do think there's a chance they can knock them out and win it tomorrow night. But the Knicks can't be happy with, hey, we can come back and win it in Game 6 because I don't think they want to. I don't think they want to be in that spot.
But that's their mentality. That's what I love about.
We'll see. They went and got Game 2.
Man.
They went and got Game 2.
Up 15, down 15. They play the same way, man.
Right. All right. Appreciate it. I got to go. Big Paulie, everybody. When we come back, Carnell Tate said something on a podcast that I think was very interesting as it relates to our team. You'll hear it next. So we are, 6 weeks after the NFL draft, and our football team's putting out a lot of those videos that they put out this time of year. We're going to talk about some of those videos maybe later on in the show about, when they were on the clock for Sonny Styles at 7, and then, the calls that, went into the actual discussion of the pick, the back and forth between the guys on the discussion about the pick, and then everybody talking to Sonny Styles when they picked him. Well, that stuff is out now. But what's also out is a Carnell Tate appearance on a Monroe St. Brown's podcast yesterday. I want you to hear what he said. Remember, Carnell Tate was picked 4th overall by the Titans, which was surprising, and he was very surprised by it because he thought pretty much at the end of the day there was another team that was going to select him.
First question is, did you know you were going to go that early? No, I didn't know I was going to go that early. We thought my draft started at 8. We said we started at 4 and then 4 to 15, but like realistically I thought I was going to go like 6 or 7 or 8.
Did you have other teams you felt like they were targeting you that wanted you?
I thought Cleveland. I thought they weren't going to pass up on me. And then also Commanders. So I think I was locked in with the Commanders. And then they were like saying that, the Chiefs, you're not going to get past them. If you're there at 9, they're going to take you. What? Yeah. But I thought I was going to the Commanders.
Carnell Tate thought he was locked in with the Commanders at 7. He ended up getting picked at 4 overall. This is so, I think there's been so much conversation about the lack of wide receiver help for Jaden Daniels, the lack of a true wide receiver number 2. And, already criticism for Adam Peters and Lance Newmark and company for not, adding more to the room. I mean, they've added De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson and Antonio Williams to the room. They drafted Antonio Williams, as you know, in the 3rd round. I don't know if Carnell Tate had been there with Sonny Styles, who the pick would have been, but there's no doubt that Carnell Tate was a guy that they were interested in taking at number 7 had he fallen to number 7. And, before the draft, that particular week leading up to it, I think we all thought there was a pretty good chance Carnell Tate would be there at 7. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily believed in Carnell Tate as worthy of the number 7 pick. I liked him personally for whatever it's worth. It's the draft. We're wrong most of the time. But I actually view Carnell Tate as even more than a high-end number 2. I think he could be a future number 1 kind of receiver. I liked him at Ohio State. I like the talent. I love the hands. I love the route running ability. I love the clutch play. Everything about Carnell Tate I liked more so than Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver from Arizona State, because Tyson had the injuries. And, Tyson was on the board at 7. So clearly Washington, based on this, if we believe that Tate thought he was going to Washington at number 7 for a good reason, that there was indication that he was, if you believe, and I do believe, that Carnell Tate was certainly one of those players that they had targeted at number 7, they had Tate above Tyson because Tyson was on the board for them at 7 and they didn't pick Tyson. So they had Tate ahead of Tyson. The reason probably is because of Tyson's injury history. Tyson had injuries at Arizona State, and Washington has already, told us through what we learned about the negotiations with Terry McLaurin a year ago that analytically they believe, receivers, once they get to a certain age, are more prone to injury, and you can't, spend too much on receivers once they get into their early 30s. And the analytics on college wide receivers who get injured are that more often than not, that is a precursor of more injuries to come when they become professional players. So Tyson, I'm assuming, was not a player Washington was interested in at 7. And I'm saying that like if Styles hadn't been on the board, would they have taken Tyson? Probably not. They like Tate more than Tyson, it would appear. What I don't know is if Tate and Styles were both there, which means that another player would have been needed to have been picked, in the top 6 for Tate and Styles to have both been there. So whether it was a Tyson that went earlier, a Tyson goes to Cleveland at 6 instead of Cleveland trading it, or to Kansas City at 6, whatever the scenario would have had to have been for Tate and Styles to both be on the board. What I don't know is, would they have taken Styles or would they have taken Tate? Would they have taken Delane had Delane not been picked at 6 with the Chiefs trading up to that spot? I certainly think that Delane is probably a player that they had some interest in. But, I thought that was an interesting comment. And I think some level, not, 100%, of confirmation that Washington really did like Tate. And Washington really did want to, just like they did with Alec Pierce and Romeo Doubs, they really did have upgrading the wide receiver room as a priority in this offseason. They were all in on Pierce. Pierce stayed in Indianapolis. They were all in on Romeo Doubs. They liked Doubs a lot and made an offer for Doubs. And then after missing on those two, they went out and they brought back De'Ami Brown and they added Van Jefferson. And then they focused in on the draft. Clearly, for whatever reason, there wasn't, a preference for Jennings out of San Francisco, but they focused on the draft. And in the draft, Tate may have been the guy at 7. Well, Tate goes at 4. A surprise to everybody. When you think about that first round or the first, 7 picks, the surprise is Tate at 4. Nobody had that. And we knew going into this draft that after Mendoza, there was like a bunch of players and nobody was convinced of the order, which made that draft kind of exciting going into it, because usually you have a good sense of 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as well. And then the draft becomes interesting in terms of what will happen. That draft was interesting starting at 2 with the Jets following the Raiders selecting Mendoza. I don't know what Washington would have done had Tate and Styles both been on the board. It would have been hard for Tate, Styles, and Delane to have all been on the board at 7. I don't know what would have happened in that scenario either. That's less realistic. It was realistic, maybe not before the draft, but as the draft started to unfold, especially when Love goes 3 and Tate goes 4, there's a chance Styles is going to be on the board. And then it was Styles and Downs and Tyson, and would Delane be there? I still am going to be very interested to see what kind of career Ruben Bain Jr. has from Miami. He still would have been, for me, in terms of the tape, and I don't have any of the other information, he would have been, to me, the guy that I would have selected at 7 based on the tape, based on the way he played football in college. I think Ruben Bain Jr. was the second best college player in America after Mendoza. I think he was that good. And I do think that short arms and all, his style and his motor do translate to the NFL. We'll find out whether or not Todd Bowles got himself a great player at 15 overall for the Bucs in Ruben Bain Jr. But I think this is definitely a level of confirmation that Tate would have been an interesting, more than just a possibility, but perhaps a probability at 7. But if Tennessee had taken Styles at 4, rather than taking somebody else, I don't know what the Styles Tate selection would be. By the way, they're going to tell you now, no, it was Styles. If Styles made it to 7, Styles was our guy. Of course, they're going to say that now, but probably Tate was in the mix. Meantime, so you don't get Pierce, you don't get Doubs. You add, De'Ami and Van Jefferson, but that doesn't necessarily solve your problem, you don't think? So now you're honed in on Tate in the draft. You don't get Tate. And now Ayuk and others become more of a possibility. Look, I think before the draft, we all said draft Tate, but that doesn't and shouldn't prevent you from adding Brandon Ayuk. By the way, at noon, Grant Cohn, who's covered the 49ers forever, and he was the guy you mentioned to me the other day that kind of, didn't you say, or one of the callers say, that he has been more of a Brandon Ayuk supporter in this.
He's been much more critical of the Niners and their front office.
Niners.
And
so
yeah,
we'll have
and
him on at 12. That'll be good. Right now, let me just ask you, Max. Would you rather have Tate or Styles?
It's tough. I think I would probably prefer Styles just because I need a long-term option as a defensive leader. I still have Terry McLaurin, I still have Jaden Daniels, and I still have a few offensive weapons. And I like the fact that Antonio Williams is also in the building as well. So I think I would probably have picked Styles there because that was kind of my list at the time. It was Love, Styles, and then Tate. So I think I probably would have preferred and stuck with Sonny Styles.
Friend of mine just texted me and said, don't you think Love was their number one had he dropped to 7?
I think it was probably how their top 3 worked out. I think their top 3 was Love, Tate, Styles in that order. But I mean,
yeah, I think it became more apparent as we got closer that more likely than not, Love wasn't going to be there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like that's the.
I
other
don't know that Love was their number one.
Mansour Delane even said, like at his introductory thing for the Chiefs, "Mr. Peters, you're too late." So I think Adam had everybody on their toes.
Yeah, I think Love, Tate, Delane, and Styles were the 4 that were a possibility for them at 7, and that they had them ranked in some order. I can't tell you what the order is, though. I'm not convinced Love would have been number 1. I'm not convinced of that. But that's sort of because of how the way I felt about Love. I really think Love's going to be good, but I don't think he was worth 7 overall in the draft. I don't know how they saw him. I will eventually get, as the summer goes on, I will eventually learn more, I think, about what maybe the order was. And specific to Love, what they thought of Love. Or at least what their scouting department thought of Love. I'm looking forward to figuring that out. I mean, it's the draft. It's like crapshoot. I'm happy with Styles. Totally happy with Styles. I think Styles was a really good pick. I think he's going to be a really good player. I'll just say what I said draft night, draft deck next day, and the days that followed. His all-world, all-time Indy Combine, I don't think that's necessarily the player you're going to see on the field. I don't think that's, the 4.4 with the 44-inch vertical or whatever the vertical was, and the broad jump that was all time. And this was the best workout ever for a linebacker. I think for those that didn't see, Sonny Styles play college football, you're going to be expecting this sick, fast, ridiculous all-time athlete. Remember Mike Mamula? I think got picked in the top 10, had an all-time Indy Combine testing, turned out to be a bust. I'm not comparing Styles to Mamula. I think Styles is a great football player, and I think he's very athletic. But I don't think all-world athlete, is what you watched when you watched Sonny Styles play at Ohio State. What you saw was a great, instinctive, big-time physical player who was also very athletic with long arms and tall, more than, oh, my God, this guy is a blur like Sean Taylor was as a player. Interesting, though, from Carnell Tate. He thought that Washington was locked in on him at 7. And maybe they would have been. It'd be interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the conversations we've had, over the last 6 weeks, 5 weeks since the draft, we would have had far different conversations had they selected Carnell Tate. And I know some of you didn't love Tate and thought 7 was too early. But the conversations we've had about the number 2 wide receiver would have been muted for the most part. There would have still been some Brandon Ayuk chatter, but with the behavior of Ayuk here the last week, it would have been a lot easier for everybody, not just maybe, a slight majority, but everybody to just say, no, thank you, we're good. Ben Standig's going to join us early today. We'll get to him next because we've got Grant Cohn coming up at 12 in Ben's spot. I did want to mention real quickly, because I didn't have a chance to talk about this on the show yesterday either. But, man, there has been just a rash recently of, NFL players in trouble. Josh Jacobs from a couple of weeks ago, domestic assault charges. And now Denver Broncos linebacker Jonathan Cooper arrested late last week. Again, domestic violence charges and allegedly violating some sort of protection order that this girlfriend had from him after, multiple charges previously. And I bring it up because it's like, when we had that arrest warrant for out last week, the misdemeanor traffic citation arrest warrant for Brandon Ayuk, there were a lot of people that said, that's it, I'm out. I'm like, for that? No. That is not a disqualifier. No, I mean, Nolan Smith had a reckless driving. Reckless driving is worse than what he was doing, although I guess technically it was reckless. But we've had I think I said at the time, it's like every week or every 2 weeks, we end up with charges against an NFL player that are 10x in terms of the serious nature of them versus Brandon Ayuk's misdemeanor traffic thing. Now, I will absolutely say that I thought it was weird that it took so long for those charges to be brought. By the way, do we know anything in terms of, it was an arrest warrant issued? Has there been any talk from an Ayuk attorney about the charges? Nothing, right?
Nothing from that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it. The latest story was the last story. Santa Clara District Attorney's Office issued a warrant for the arrest. So did they arrest him?
No, the warrant's out there, and then I think he has an opportunity to turn himself in, or
what how long? Nothing in this story talked about what's next. When there's a warrant for the arrest of, don't you usually go arrest him, or does he have a certain amount of time to turn himself in?
I was gonna say, if you can arrest him, but again, like I don't think anybody is too aware of the whereabouts of Brandon Ayuk. So it depends on like where he is at this point in time, if he's still in California or if he's in I don't know, Santa Clara County or whatever. There's just a lot of things to figure out before he can or is like officially like in cuffs or behind bars or dealing with this.
He's not going to be behind bars
he's not,
for
like,
a misdemeanor
exactly,
charge.
He's going to get put in a holding cell real quick, and then it's going to get worked out by his lawyers.
I don't mean. I think you just. I don't know. I'm interested to know what the next step is there. We'll ask Grant Cohn when he's on with us at 12, because there's been literally no follow-up to that story about the arrest warrant. All right, Ben Standig next. booked at 12. Grant Cohn from San Francisco will be on with us. Ben, of course, writes a Substack column covering this team. He does it very well. I would urge all of you to subscribe. I'm a subscriber from day one. It's barely anything, a few bucks a month. I think he could charge more, but that's a conversation for another day. But he writes prolifically about this team, covers the team. Link to it on X at Ben Standing. So I just played in the last segment this sound from Carnell Tate saying he believes on the Amon-Ra St. Brown podcast. I don't know if you've seen it, but he basically thinks he was locked into Washington at number 7 before the Titans took him at number 4. Now, that also assumes that, some of the other guys like Styles, Delane maybe, Love maybe, weren't going to be there or weren't projected to be there. How do you think it played out?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember what the world was like.
It was just 6 weeks ago, basically almost to the day. Yeah.
You think I remember what happened yesterday?
No, you struggle with yesterday.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously Delane was a name. Styles was I think the question with Styles was like, was he going to get past Tennessee at 4? Kind of felt like the big wonder there. I mean, look, obviously, does this team need another receiver? I mean, it's all we've talked about for the last several weeks has been the idea that they would, that hey, they could still use more help there, and Tate was viewed as like the top receiver there. I mean, yes, if Styles was there and Tate was there, I still would think they would take Styles. The Brandon Ayuk in theory should have nothing to do with what they would have done in the draft. But again, if they are so all in on getting Ayuk, then I don't know that spending a first round pick makes as much sense, especially when you're not going. It doesn't appear they're going to be using 11 personnel nearly as much as they had in the past. But whatever. I mean, who knows? I mean, obviously, it could have been the call. I mean, again, if Styles is gone and Love is gone, sure. I mean, receiver was obviously a need. We know they didn't have a second round pick, so they were going to have to wait. So I guess look, it's certainly possible, but Styles also said he thought he was pretty much going to Washington. So who knows?
Yeah, I think in order. All right, number 1 would have been to get a really good offer to move back. I still believe that that's what they were hoping for more than anything else at 7, is that there were enough compelling players on the board that somebody felt, like Kansas City did with Cleveland, somebody felt good enough about offering something to trade up to get 7. Because I do think they felt the same way about the draft that a lot of others did, and that is just maybe 1 or 2 or 3, absolute kind of locks, in terms of what they would be. After that, I don't know. I mean, like if Tate and Styles had both been on the board, do you think it would have been Styles? I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me if Tate was very high on that board. And that's why he got the feeling that they would take him at 7 without an opportunity to trade back. We've talked about this before, but you still think, right, that they would have preferred to have accumulated more picks and traded back from 7 as the number 1 option?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Styles was not there, based on the way that the world, essentially kind of played out, I think that trading back would have been ideal. Now, the way the draft was breaking down, like depending on what positions you cared about for this year, it feels like 10 after about 10 or 11, there felt like a real drop off. So, I don't know that they would have gone past. I think the Dolphins were at 11. That was a team I kind of kept wondering about just because they have a ton of picks. I know they weren't, they're in essentially rebuild mode, but, maybe they just love somebody. That would have been, a thought. But, I mean, look, we can say this all is about receiver, right? They made moves or attempted to get Alec Pierce and Romeo Dobbs, 2 guys that were, good money. So obviously that's, shows an interest. And then, the 3rd round pick, they were 2nd overall. they did take a receiver. So yeah, I mean, again, clearly they were interested in upgrading that spot, but I like I said, I still think Styles would have been the call, the younger, faster bit. I mean, it just played out over and over again with this team, and I just would imagine that still would have been the call. But yeah, sure. I mean, receiver obviously was a priority for them to at least to some degree.
Yeah, I think some of the criticism, and I get it more on calls. You probably get it more with tweets and emails to your Substack or comments to the Substack. The criticism of Adam Peters and company that they didn't do enough at wide receiver, I just can't get on board with that, because I know that clearly it was a priority to do more. And there's no guarantee in free agent. Takes two to tango, and Pierce and Dobbs didn't want to tango. And then if Tate was the guy that they were going to take at 7, somebody surprised them and took Tate at 4. Here's the one thing I guess we can deduct from Tate's comments is that they had Tate ahead of Tyson, because Tyson was on the board at 7 and they didn't take him. So I'm assuming that they had Tate ahead of Tyson. But I don't really feel like they were negligent. That's a harsh word. In their pursuit of more help for Jaden at the wide receiver spot.
I guess my only thought there was this. I'm with you. Like I know people have said, well, if they really wanted Alec Pierce, they would have just gotten him. That's all a joke. I'm like, well, he has to accept the offer, and there was a lot of reasons for him personally why he wanted to stay with the Colts. I mean, Dobbs. Hey, the Patriots just went to the Super Bowl, and they have their own young rising quarterback in Drake May. So that none of that is terribly surprising. The only thing I would say, from in the individual moment, yeah, I wouldn't say that Peters and company weren't attempting to really bolster this. I would just say though that now that we're 3 off seasons into this, the receiver room looks very similar to what it did when Jaden got here. And I think that aspect of it is where you're like, okay, how come there hasn't been more success in getting help around him? I mean, look, maybe Chikakonkwo turns out to be the best guy that they possibly could have had. And maybe Antonio Williams is, hey, Terry McLaurin was the 3rd round pick in 2019. Maybe Antonio Williams is follows in that success. But, that would be my only question. You look at what the Patriots have done around Drake May, what the Broncos have done around Bo Nix, the Bears around Caleb Williams. They have gone out and gotten those pieces when these guys on a rookie contract and to help the guy, elevate. And that has not happened here to that degree. They did other things. They helped the offensive line. But they have not – it hasn't worked out, even though I do think they at least this offseason tried to make it work out.
Yeah, for sure. They tried to make it work out. What I was going to say about just the idea that it's the same as 2024. I mean, I think there's certainly a chance that it's the same as 2024. But I think what gets lost in that comparison is that Terry McLaurin is 2 years older and coming off a really difficult season for him. And he was the critical component of what they had in 2024. And he would need to be again in 2026 if they're going to get the same results with the same crew.
Yeah, I mean, for sure the McLaurin part in terms of the age is different. The fact that it feels like there's much more of a chance that this could be his last year because of salary cap situations than it did then. I mean, I think we were all in 2024 thinking it was just a mortal lock that he was going to get an extension and there wouldn't be any drama. But, and again, we don't know. Maybe Antonio Williams becomes a guy, maybe, Traylon Burks becomes more consistent, whatever. But that year it was Terry McLaurin. They didn't have, at this point, they didn't even have Noah Brown, right? He didn't show up until the season started. And even still, he's, a good player. If he could ever stay healthy, be a legit starter. But that was the risk. And then everybody else, the Diabis, who's obviously back, Olamide Zaccheaus, Jamison Crowder, I think everybody was going, I don't know, that doesn't seem like a lot. Now here you have, again, similar, Diabis back, Traylon Burks, Van Jefferson, we still haven't seen enough from Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane to definitively say they're going to be guys. So it's just, to me, the reason it looks the same as Terry McLaurin and then lottery tickets. And then, and that's why it's like, okay, if Jaden does what Jaden does, as we saw in his rookie year, then it should work. Again, the one thing I do like about this receiver room is that if they're going to go down this route of, okay, we don't have one guy right now, what do we do? They have different pieces, for that. I mean, David Blau the other day when we spoke with him, I don't think I'm doing this. He said that they try to assemble the room similar to the way, like if an NBA team was assembling a roster. You need a shooter, you need a defender, you need a point guard, you need a rim protector, you need guys who have different skills, outside of your main guy, in this case Terry. And I think they did that, and that's why I keep mentioning the idea of, like, are they going to moneyball this position where it's recreating the number 2 receiver in the aggregate rather than having
Thank you, Billy Bean.
Yeah, no, 100%. So obviously, would they prefer the one guy? Sure, but like, if they're not going to get that, then that was the thing last year, right? I mean, it is so funny to say that De'Ami Brown was the missing piece, but he really was. I mean, in so many ways, because especially when Terry got hurt, they had nobody who could get the ball down the field. Like, nobody could go down, could make a play down the field. The defense then started pressing, their players up closer to the line of scrimmage, and everything kind of fell apart from there. So that aspect I like, but yeah, obviously I think they would prefer to have figured out a way to get one guy in there, but it didn't happen.
You wrote the other day, lost in the receiver chatter, Washington's tight ends are making a case. So summarize that.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, at Tuesday's practice, Terry McLaurin and Antonio Williams were working on the side field. So, okay, what does that potentially mean? Now, obviously, they're working on very specific parts of the game. This isn't like Jaden drops back the pass and finds the perfect target. It's more like, okay, we're going to try to run these types of different routes, these combinations. But because there was no Antonio Williams and McLaurin, then the tight ends did feel like they were a little bit more involved and whether it was kicking passes up the seam or lining up on the outside, Okonkwo and Bates and Sinnott were more involved. And, this is I think this is going to be one of the biggest differences between this year and last year. We talk a lot about the under center part. Obviously, that's huge. The fact that they're going to huddle, that's big. But I do think that the tight ends collectively are going to get more involved. I mean, obviously, Cliff Kingsbury's like what Zach Ertz could do. But then when Zach Ertz got hurt, it's not like Ben Sinnott all of a sudden was getting a ton of targets. Like it felt like a very specific type of tight end that he needed. Whereas I think here, it feels like there's routes they want run, and they can have these guys get that job done. I mean, Sinnott, obviously, he's been a guy that, along with a lot of the players in that 24 class, are kind of still waiting for more. As an athlete, he's pretty impressive. But as a fit for what they were doing before, it just did not work. So I think that the 3 tight ends, I expect Sinnott and Bates to catch more passes. And to go back to the last conversation, again, could they use a better receiver opposite Terry? Sure. I think the number 2 just may ultimately be Chig Okonkwo. I think they're going to use more tight ends this year, more 2 tight end sets, meaning you probably only have 2 receivers out there. So if you view Okonkwo as essentially as the slot guy, then if he delivers, when they hope, especially athletically and yards after the catch, et cetera, then we could maybe just stop talking about that. But I think the tight ends are going to be more involved in general, and I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said, if Bates and Sinnott, they both had 11 receptions last year. If they're healthy, I would expect them to beat that number and possibly double it or so, depending on how many mouths are ultimately get fed.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ertz has been the second most targeted player for Washington's offense in 24 and 25 in the Kingsbury scheme. And yeah, there were injuries to Terry, but Ertz was injured too. So I definitely expect Chig to be the second most targeted pass catcher, in the offense. It just would be a lot easier to even increase his targets if you had another stretch the field wide receiver threat to really open up, the field a little bit more, which, as you pointed out, without Terry, they were really up against it last year. Specific to Sinnott, I keep coming back to the comment that Adam Peters made when they drafted him, that he sees some Kyle Juszczyk in him. I know it's OTAs and we're not learning a lot, but I asked you after the first set of OTAs, did you notice anything formationally when the offense was out there with Sinnott in particular? Was there an H-back, a fullback formation? How do you see him playing? I mean, Bates is the blocking tight end, but is Sinnott going to be a guy that, is that first sort of fullback / tight end option on the bootleg, on the quarterback keeper? How do you see him, lining up and playing? Do you have any sense of that from anything that's happened so far here in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, like to your point, it's hard to gauge too much with OTAs, and they are kind of, prefer us not saying too much about what we see out there, even now. But yeah, look, I think 12 and 13 personnel is obviously, based on last year in the league, was becoming, more vogue. And one of the things that I think was frustrating for me going back to last year, and this I think goes to the point of that Kingsbury's ultimately his system was just maybe too rigid, is that, when the injuries started to happen at receiver, they didn't seem to pivot towards, okay, well, what else do we have? What else can we, how do we chef salad this offense? Okay, here's the pieces we have. How do we make this work? And instead of therefore going with more, combination of Bill and pick your other running back, or going with more John Bates and Sinnott, they just stuck with the receivers who just weren't getting the job done. So I think it could be the case where they have, Sinnott line up in 13 personnel, maybe playing a little bit more in that fullbacky role, but, he could just be, lining Chig out more and having Sinnott and Bates, be the inline blockers. But I think Sinnott's blocking, I think, was a bit underrated. We obviously know that Bates is one of the better guys in the league, so that gets the attention, but I thought Sinnott was pretty physical when he was in there. So, yeah, I mean, again, if you tell me that part of the overall offensive solution is you have Chig, essentially be the second receiver, whether he's out in the slot or a little more outside, with Bates and Sinnott then playing the more inline tight end roles, I mean, again, that's how you maximize the talent you have. Instead of complaining you don't have this, okay, well, we do have this, so let's do that. So I think it's more like in that, whether he's ultimately playing fullback or not, I just think the idea that they could use 3 tight ends doesn't seem as crazy to me, especially, again, when you don't have the obvious fit at the other receiver spots.
Yeah. The only thing I would say, it's not really significant, but I did think after that disastrous stretch of Seattle and Detroit, there were changes, and I'm just looking through my game notes from, that I sort of put together from the whole season. I mean, the Madrid game, which followed the Detroit game, was a real emphasis to run the football, and it was a lesser defensive opponent as well than Seattle was, of course, 2 weeks earlier. But that's where you saw Chris Rodriguez really start to get to be a big part. By the way, you can almost argue Chris Rodriguez in the end of season for him is what got him this contract in Jacksonville, because he ended up, averaging down the stretch, close to 5 yards a carry, and, was rushing 14, 15 times a game. But they were kind of out of options at that point too, because they couldn't protect and they didn't have anybody to throw to. Anyway, Ayuk, we haven't talked since the last video. At least there wasn't. There hasn't been a video now for as of today. We may get 2 straight days without a video. So, what was your reaction to the last one where he called the 49ers stupid and dumb and mad? Of course they are.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting because am I right? You're having Grant Cohn come on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's been. He's done the circuit. He's been very pro Ayuk, which is very odd because it feels like that is a very much outlier take. And, I look, there are certain aspects of Ayuk's situation based on the little bit that we seem to know where you can feel sympathetic toward it, right? I get that the Niners are not always necessarily the most player-friendly group, that, Kyle Shanahan and the organization may see things a certain way and they may do things a certain way. And, that's like how life works, right? I mean, the bosses are the bosses and the employees are the employees, and you kind of got to figure out how to make that work. I understand that athletes are different than a guy who's, Jim from the office, sitting there, but at the same point, it's the same general idea. But the idea, again, the thing is, like, you can tell me whatever you want about that the Niners were mean to Ayuk, but all he needs to do is say, you know what, look, I don't want to play here anymore. I'm willing to forego this money, as he clearly was, by not fighting it back. But in order to do that, you have to let me go. That to me is like the whole point of this on some level. Whatever the 49ers are doing, right or wrong, whatever, it's pretty simple. Go to them with this proposal, and then you can get out, or just show up at any point. He's not doing any of that. So whatever he is doing these days makes absolutely no sense, on top of the no sense of letting the 49ers take away the money. But again, why did they take it away in the first place? Because he apparently went AWOL and stopped showing up for rehab or whatever. So I again, I don't know Brandon Ayuk. We don't know all the details. I just, know what I've read and heard. But it's hard for me to have really any sympathy for him at this point when it is so simple. All he has to do is show up, or all he had to do was have his agent say, hey, keep the money. Get me out of it. Let me go. If you don't let me go, well, for the problems. But right? How simple would that have been? Take the money or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know San Fran, obviously, they're going to, it's probably underappreciated that they're going to have to suffer a big salary cap hit in order to blow this whole thing up. But it's going to happen anyway, right? So it's not like, the same thing would have happened, except he's not a pain in their butt, and this is all over with. But I have hard to have much sympathy for how he's handled any of this.
Yeah, you guys, we're in agreement. I think the thing at this point, that if you want to take all of the he said, she said, and by the way, one side hasn't said anything. If you want to take all of that out of it and just focus on the last week, what we haven't heard from him, which I think would be beneficial for everybody to hear, and actually something that actually may lift the opinion of him, is how much he wants to play football. How good the knee's in great shape. I'm in great shape. I miss football so much after not playing it. I can't wait to play more football. I'm ready to play football. Nothing about his desire to play football. And I think that actually would help him. I'm not a big fan of the workout videos, but I actually think something like that would be more beneficial for him. Instead, he chose to, in his lambasting of his employer, highlight the fact that he was a terrible, terrible signing. Like, I don't think he realized that while, yes, it's because they stupid, they stupid for signing you to the deal because they got nothing back for it. This is, man, somebody's got to give this guy some direction that he's willing to listen to, because you're getting to the point, I said this the other day, you might be getting close to that point where he's going to have to beg for that second, chance, that he's going to have to go on some sort of redemption tour to say, yeah, all of that was just hurt, but I'm now focused solely on this. Give me a shot. Because when you look crazy, you tend to scare people away from maybe their initial instincts. We'll see.
Yeah, I wrote the other day, we talked about it, I think on Monday, about if Washington is, as they claim, likes their receiver room and they feel good about it and all that, then why do we keep talking about Brandon Ayuk? Because all that would need to happen is, if they actually are not interested, is somehow it gets leaked that Washington is not interested. We all can understand that Adam Peters has a relationship with Ayuk. He clearly knows what's going on over in that building, having been there for many years. I'm looking at it from Dan Quinn's perspective, like, what's going on here? What do you want? you want this guy? We just spent 3 years talking about culture and whatever, and this guy's willing to blow up his current employer, like that. I mean, let's not forget he was, before Jaden played in his rookie year, they were hanging out, and Ayuk I guess Jaden was showing some of their practice tape or camp tape, and Ayuk put something online.
Leaked it.
What is that? Like, if you're going to be that much of a wild card that at any minute of the day you could do something like this, no, like that's one of the best things you could say about this group has been that despite all the losing last year, I had no sense that there was anybody was like going rogue or not buying in anymore. They did play hard under Quinn. They all these things. So like it just seems like, wait, why are we bringing this element in here when it's just so unhinged? I don't get it. So
the only thing about bringing him into an environment like this one is that you'd be bringing him in on a deal that would allow you to quickly cut ties with him if he is crazy. And by the way, you're going to do a thorough medical, physical, mental, the whole thing before you give him a totally one-sided team-friendly deal. That's the only way you would do it. And look, this guy's got a big date coming up. It'll be the beginning of training camp, assuming nothing happens between now and then. And then we'll see if he's actually got the stones to show up and force their hand, which he could have done during OTAs. But, again, it doesn't. That's another sort of data point that would suggest he's not really focused on football and his next spot. He's focused more on ripping his employer. All right, I got to run. I'll talk to you later.
Of course, see ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. When we come back, Grant Cohn, who's covered the 49ers forever and does have apparently a pro Brandon Ayuk take. He'll be our guest.
And another thing, you want to know why they really mad, though? They mad because they stupid. They dumb. They mad that they pay me $50 million in 8 months. And they avoided my guarantees for 2027. And I'm about to be on a new team in 2027. They mad at they selves for real. Acting like they mad at me, but they stupid ass mad at they self.
That was the video from earlier this week, Brandon Ayuk's video. Joining us right now is Grant Cohn. Grant covers the 49ers for Sports Illustrated. You can link to all of his stuff on X at Grant COHN. And I have to tell you that literally I had, for you today, I all I wanted to do was have somebody on that could take us through this, saga chronologically. And so literally during the break, as we were waiting to call you, I check out your X, and Grant's just posted a story, how the 49ers relationship with Brandon Ayuk deteriorated in 21 steps. It's the chronological layout of the entire thing. Because, Grant, I think for us, it's been, well, there's so much we don't know. What's the root cause of all this? So I'm not going to read your entire 21 steps. I want people to go read it themselves. But I want to jump to, first of all, they loved him. You write about how they moved up in the draft, they picked him, they loved him. And at the end of 2023, with one, doghouse episode in 2022 or 2021, basically he was a top 10 receiver in the league, which I totally agree with, and was here talking about it at the end of 2023. And then, all hell begins to break loose. So that basically takes us up, through the Super Bowl, which he was a big part of the NFC Championship game. You write that they wouldn't have been in the Super Bowl without him. And then the offseason starts. So let's start there chronologically. What were the significant, steps that you've got in the 21 steps that really began to influence the relationship that he had with the organization?
Well, it was always strained. They put him in the doghouse in 2021 so they could play Mohamed Sanu and Trent Sherfield, and that was weird. But when they got to 2024, they wanted him. They wanted to extend him, and they thought they could get him for $25, $26 million a year. But the Niners famously take their time with these extensions.
Right.
Maybe it used to be effective for them, but this time it didn't work out. They waited, and the Detroit Lions reset the market at wide receiver and gave Amon-Ra St. Brown $30 million a year. And the Niners, their minds were blown. They thought only like the top wide receivers would get that. And at this point, Brandon Ayuk looked at the market and said, well, that's what I'm worth too. I'm just as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown. And the Niners dragged their feet on this, but eventually did offer him $30 million a year. And he signed the deal. But when he signed it, the Niners were like, they seemed bitter about it. They needed everyone to know that Ayuk waited weeks to sign the deal, that he could have signed it earlier in training camp, but didn't. And that they tried to trade him, that they wanted to trade him to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that Kyle Shanahan ran into the front office at the last minute and stopped the trade. So they let everyone know, like, we're conflicted on this. We're not of one mind on this. Brandon Ayuk heard it. It's a very weird way to introduce your young star player who's supposed to be around for the future. And I think that really got things, it got off the second contract off on the wrong foot to begin with.
Okay, real quickly, because you mentioned the doghouse episode, but you wrote that it was unspecified reasons. Like, why did he end up in the doghouse that particular year? Is it just because, look, we have experience with Kyle here, and we know that can happen, but do you even have a guess as to why he ended up in the doghouse?
Yes, I have a guess. I mean, they never explained why, and they made it seem, they made you infer that it must have been something in practice or his effort, but he's always been a great practice player. He always blocks during games. I think really it was a personality issue. Kyle Shanahan makes the picks, and he makes the picks based on film. And he was right on Brandon Ayuk. He saw his film and got it right, but he didn't really get a feel for who Brandon is. And Kyle wants guys who get along with him, who look up to him, who are deferential to him. And Brandon Ayuk isn't that way at all. He's very quiet. He's standoffish. He doesn't play the corporate game. And I think that's what they were punishing him for being aloof, for maybe being, exactly who he's showing himself to be. So it wasn't about how he played. It was about his mix with the culture and the coach. And again, this is something they should have known before they drafted him. And once they knew it in 2021, maybe this is something they should have taken into account when they were negotiating a contract with him. All
right. Well, let's jump to what you just talked about, because this starts. This seems like the actual true beginning of, a fracture, a rift. They offer him the deal. It's the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal, essentially. So they've given him market value for the kind of player he believes he is. And then you write that Ayuk's offer had been on the table for weeks, and he took his sweet time signing it. And during that period of time, they decide they're going to try to trade him. By the way, that deal would have been on the table for him to sign. It would have had to have been pulled for them to make the trade, and then Pittsburgh would have had the responsibility of signing him. But do you sort of identify this as the moment where things started to go south?
Yes, absolutely. The Niners give him this contract, but they sort of do it while holding their nose, and they sort of let everyone know that, well, this is Kyle's move, and this is Kyle's responsibility, and if it doesn't work out, this is on him. So Kyle sort of takes a weird stance now that he's put his neck out for Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk now, he's gotten the money. He's the second highest paid player on the team, and he wants.
Well, what took him so long
treatment.
to sign the deal, Grant?
He's strange. I think it's clear. Here's what took him so long. He doesn't like the Niners. The Niners don't really like him, and he's thinking, "Do I sign this contract? It's a lot of money."
But Kyle liked him.
Did he? I mean, Kyle appreciated him as a player. Kyle likes Debo. Kyle and Debo Samuel are like lifelong friends. Kyle and Brandon barely talk. Brandon doesn't really have that many friends. He's friends with Jaden Daniels and his wife. So it was a very different relationship. Kyle valued him in his offense, but once he got hurt, I think there was really no ties to him anymore.
All right. So we're talking to Grant Cohn. Sports Illustrated covers the Niners. So the deal gets signed. He doesn't get traded to the Steelers. And now, before he blows his knee out in week 7, I think it was, just tell me if there was significance to this practice situation where Ayuk's wearing different shorts, and I guess the wrong shorts versus the rest of the team. Was that important? Did that further the fracture and the falling apart of the relationship?
I think it was emblematic. I think it was one example of probably many, and this one was I caught it on my iPhone camera, and he wanted some star treatment. Kyle Shanahan treats his stars differently. Trent Williams gets 2 lockers, everyone else gets 1. Debo Samuel could be 15 pounds overweight.
He gets 2 lockers?
He gets 2 lockers. He's like Barry Bonds. And he gets 2 lockers he gets 2.5 lockers. So Brandon Ayuk wanted some star treatment. He's the second highest paid player on the team. He gets more money than Trent. So he decided he wants to wear red shorts one day while everyone else wears black, and Kyle Shanahan notices, goes right over to him. I mean, gets in a big argument with him, makes Ayuk change his shorts on the field in front of everyone. It's pretty humiliating, which is like, look, man, wear the right shorts. But at the same time, it's like, if you're going to give him all this money, why don't you just give him the freaking star treat? Why don't you let him wear his freaking red shorts and have a good relationship with him so you have the player you want? But every step of the way, they gave him the money and still treated him like the second-year player in the doghouse that he was in the past.
Yeah, but he, like in this particular example, he's initiating the, for the lack of a better description, the confrontation.
Right. This is Brandon Ayuk. This is who he's always been. And this is who the Niners wanted to sign. My stance was in 2024, I was saying trade him. He doesn't fit your culture. You don't throw him the ball enough. You're a run-first team that, your offense goes through your tight end and your running back. Why don't you trade him right now? Get a second-round pick and don't enable his behavior. I mean, he's not going to change if you give him $30 million a year. He's going to stay the same and get even bolder, which is what he is. He has a point. He's always had a point. He doesn't really fit on this team. They don't really take advantage of his skill set to the fullest degree, but he doesn't go about it in the right way. This is how he acts, and he's hurting himself, and he's hurting the 49ers. They could have traded him for a second. Now they're going to try to trade him for a 7th-round pick. They're not going to get anything for him.
Yeah, real quickly before we get to, all of this stuff that we really have heard a lot about, the voided guarantees and what prompted that, et cetera. But it certainly sounds like you are a fan of Ayuk, the player. And I think there are a lot of Washington fans that, this happens in every market where you watch your own team so much more than you watch the rest of the league. So you think your own guy's better than everybody else, which is fine. But I felt like at the end of 2023, it seems like the way you felt, I thought he was a top 10 receiver and descending. Like, I thought this guy had a chance, maybe not to be Jefferson or Chase, but to be in that next tier down if he wasn't already there, at that point. Tell everybody here, like, if we did get the Brandon Ayuk of 2023, what we'd be getting.
Geez, I mean, he's a top 5 route runner in the league, or at least he was in 2023. The kind of guy who could run 20, 21, 22 miles an hour and stop on a dime and make any cut, run any route, short, intermediate, deep. And really, the Niners never took advantage of his deep prowess because it's not really their playbook. Kyle Shanahan, their quarterback's Brock Purdy. Sure. They had him more running intermediate stuff, but he can do everything. I kind of think of him as like Torrey Holt. Remember Torrey Holt? Yeah. That's who this guy could have been in that offense with that coach and that quarterback. But he was playing for Kyle and Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy. Also, he's a top 5 blocker in the league at wide receiver. He's very committed. He's usually, he was in phenomenal shape. Not like Deebo Samuel. You have to wonder, like, is he motivated? Is he happy? Is he going to run his routes hard? Like, Deebo's only really effective if he has the ball in his hands. That's not Brandon Ayuk. He was a much better player than Deebo pretty much every year except for one. And yet he always took a back seat to Deebo, which is another reason he had a slight. But what's kind of cool about Ayuk is that those chips on his shoulder fuel him. He plays extremely hard. It's kind of like Pierre Garçon. He has this very dark mentality he goes to on the field, and he's a tough guy.
Apparently there's a Brandon Ayuk post as we're sitting here talking, Grant. It's an IG. Yeah, I know. It's an IG post that he is in DC, apparently. Right, Max? Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it's just 2 pictures of him seemingly in the back of a Sprinter van with the caption, "How could you cross me?" at Chrome Hearts Official, and the location says Washington, D.C.
Okay. All right. Well, they can't do anything with him, and they can't tamper with him, and he hasn't been released yet. We'll get to that in a moment. All right, we're talking to Grant Cohn, Sports Illustrated San Francisco. So let's get to the injury and then all that happens after the injury. Give me the key pieces to where this thing completely falls apart and ends in where we are now, which is essentially a 99.99% chance he's never going to play in San Francisco again. Give us the key sort of milestone events that created the situation we're in now.
Okay, so we've already established that they've soured on this deal. They were never really 100% behind it.
Right.
He's wearing the wrong shorts. They're upset about it, but he's healthy. Then he tears up his knee, and they're looking at like, okay, well, we didn't really give him this much money when he was healthy. Now he's probably never going to be the same player. What do we do? Let's trade him. And we asked John Lynch at the combine, like, what's going on with Ayuk? Is it true that you're trying to trade him? And he was like, well, it's a funny league, and these guys are never off the table, and you always got to listen. So Ayuk heard that. He even posted about it on his YouTube channel, like, I can't believe they tried to trade me. I couldn't even walk. So he took this personally, shows up to minicamp and OTAs, not practicing. I see him having these long conversations with T.O. where T.O.'s trying to talk sense into him. Like, God, can you imagine if T.O. is the one trying to talk sense into you? Anyway, he doesn't show up. He doesn't show up to some team mandated rehab assignments in Santa Clara between minicamp and training camp. Right now, late June, early July, when no player wants to be at the facility. He doesn't show up. He's upset. And this is where it gets murky. Either the Niners immediately voided his guarantees, which I find to be, I don't think that happened. I think they threatened to void. I think they called him and said, look, dude, you better show up or we're going to void your guarantees. Knowing Ayuk, if they said that, then he'd say, go ahead and void him. Go ahead and void him, but I want you to release me or trade me to the Washington Commanders. In which case, I could see the Niners saying, all right, we'll do that, but let's keep this quiet. Let's not tell anyone. They didn't tell anyone they voided his guarantees until November. I think that could be what happened because he never challenged this with the NFLPA. He didn't try to get his guarantees back. It almost kind of seemed like he was like, please cut me. Do whatever you got to do. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired of this stuff, which I kind of respect. And then you could sort of interpret his recent social media activity as him being upset because he thought the Niners would honor that agreement and cut him after June 1st, which they haven't done. And now he's trying to force the issue on social media, which probably won't work. But that's my best interpretation of where we're at.
All right, so let me just go through it again. All right, he gets hurt. They try to trade him when he's hurt. I think that right there for me is the first time, quite honestly, that I've heard something which would at least give me some empathy for Ayuk's feelings about the organization, because you don't sign somebody. He gets hurt 7 games into the season. By the way, it's a devastating knee injury, and then you're trying to trade him. That seems. By the way, was there any interest?
I don't believe so. Again, he couldn't walk, and it's a devastating knee injury. I would think that, and the contract is so large, I would think that teams would want to see him on the field before they would trade for him. Yeah.
Of course. So then, he's missing minicamp mandatory. He's missing rehab assignments. And whether they threatened to void the guarantees or they actually did it, I don't know why there'd be a quid pro quo for that, though, Grant. Like, go ahead and void the guarantees, but because you can't, you're not going to cut him at that point. There's still perceived value. You want to get something back because it's going to be a massive dead cap hit, if you are to cut him or trade him. So that's the one part where, like, I'm just thinking intuitively, I can't imagine that they would commit to a quid pro quo. Yeah, go ahead and void my guarantees, but you've got to trade me or cut me. It seems like it wouldn't make sense for them to agree to that.
But what I don't understand is why Ayuk wouldn't at least challenge us with the NFLPA.
That's the biggest thing that we know about this whole thing. And to me, the biggest tell that he was at least in the wrong in not, reporting for those rehab checks or assignments is that the union always picks up a fight for this.
It's tricky because Kyle kind of creates some double standards. Like Nick Bosa has had many off seasons where he's rehabbing, and he famously stays in Florida. He doesn't come back. I don't think the Niners tell him, like, you need to be here every 3 weeks so we can check on you. It's so very punitive. Like, we don't trust you, Brandon. We need you here, Brandon, because we don't really think you're rehabbing, Brandon. And, like, there's so many other players on the team that, like the Niners cleared Christian McCaffrey for week 1 of 2024. He told them right before the game started, I don't feel good, and didn't play until out of the bye week and went to Germany. And they didn't say anything. It seems like the Niners made a big deal of it because they don't like Brandon, and they tried to trade him, and they wanted to get out of the deal. And this was sort of like an opening. He was upset. He didn't show up to something that was probably punitive and probably just for him. It wouldn't have been for other players who were making this much money. And maybe he deserved it, maybe not. But I think that's what happened. Otherwise, it just seems like
but even if that happened,
and be like, it's not fair. How come Bosa doesn't have to? Why do I have to be here and Bosa doesn't have to be here? That's not fair.
Well, it really doesn't matter if contractually he's supposed to and they wanted him to, whether it's lack of trust or punitive or whatever. My question to you would be, if he believed that, the voiding of guarantees would get him traded or cut, and here we are almost, 8, 9, 10 months later, why haven't they fought the void of the guarantees?
I have no idea.
He didn't get what he wanted.
Ayuk is thinking. I have no idea what Brandon Ayuk is, but I do know that he showed up to OTAs last year. He showed up to minicamp. He didn't show up to the rehab assignments. He showed up to training camp. He was there every day. He was in the meeting rooms. He was there at the preseason games. He was there at the regular season games. He was running routes before those games. It seemed like he was trying to play along with the Niners and show teams that he was healthy and maybe rehab some trade value. And then the trade deadline passed and they didn't trade him or clear him. And then he stopped showing up. So that's what happened.
Right. You said something, by the way. You said that, after the injury, maybe they thought, or maybe everybody thought he was never going to be the same player again after that injury. Do you have a sense of what that knee is? Is he going to be, a different player because of that injury moving forward?
I mean, there's a chance, right? It was an ACL and an MCL and a meniscus. Right. Is he going to make a full recovery? Maybe, but we haven't seen him running really. We saw him last year. We haven't seen him this year since he left the team. All of his videos are really tight on his face. Is he in shape? Can he run? What does it look like? No idea.
By the way, in talking about the trade deadline, I just want to make it clear when you said that you were talking about the 2025 trade deadline, that he was hoping to get moved by then. And I'm wondering if there was any interest at that point, because at that point we knew about the voided guarantees, which may have been a red flag for teams. But do you think that prior to the, whatever it was, October 31st, November 1st, whatever it was last season, was there interest and they just didn't do it, or was there no interest?
Well, I think I've made it clear enough that he only wants to play for the Washington Commanders. And since he's already quit on one team and walked away from him, I think any other team would be absolutely insane to try to trade for him. Only team that he wants to play for is Washington. He doesn't have to play football for money anymore. He wants to play for the love of the game if he ever plays again, and that'll be with Jaden Daniels. And even Washington won't trade for him because they know the Niners are going to have to cut him eventually. And there's a possibility that Brandon really isn't going to be good anymore. So the fact that the Niners are holding on to him to possibly trade him kind of seems like not a joke, but it's just not the real reason. Like, they're just trying to spite Brandon, and they have every right to do that because they feel Brandon screwed them over. And it's just sort of like an eye for an eye at this point.
Yeah, and I also think that, you can make the case, too, that why give Washington a total, 3 months of an off season when they're in the NFC and we're playing them, rather than giving Brandon to them at the last possible moment, which I think is August 31st. But here's where we get to the present. So these videos, personally, I don't think that's the best way to get Kyle Shanahan to do anything other than to dig his heels in. We're pretty familiar with the Shanahans in this market. But you mentioned you think this is some sort of strategy to try to get them to do something. Why didn't he just show up for OTAs and force their hand?
Yeah, it's not that simple. He needs to file for reinstatement with the league. He needs to send a letter to the league and to the 49ers officially filing for he can't just show up. And the Niners don't necessarily have to reinstate him. Like, there's going to be a negotiation, and he might have to give back some of his bonus money. And maybe he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he feels like it's all another humiliation, that he has to go back to them and bend the knee, and he would maybe rather not do that and keep his money than play football again. I really don't. I feel like Brandon's not acting rationally. He's making a lot of very emotional decisions, which you're not supposed to do in life. And he's going to look back on this in 10 to 15 years and regret it, even if he has a point. But he can't just show up. First of all, there's a warrant out for his arrest in Santa Clara. Second of all, he needs to actually file for reinstatement. And there's going to be a financial negotiation where I'm sure the Niners want back a couple $1 million.
I mentioned earlier, have we had a follow-up to the warrant for his arrest story? Did he get arrested? What do we know about that?
He's not in California. It's so weird, right? Because he basically told on himself. He made that weird video speeding past the Niners facility in December. And then right when OTAs are about to start, and right after June 1st, when maybe he might show up, then they finally charge him with a misdemeanor and put a warrant out for his arrest because he apparently hasn't paid his fine. It's very strange. A lot of people in the Bay, or Niner fans, were speculating if the Niners called the police department and were push a button or something. But very strange. He has a lot of hoops to jump through before he gets back on a football field. And just from the posts he's putting on social media, it doesn't seem like he's prepared to jump through them yet.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing missing from all of these social media posts, personally, as a Skins fan and wanting to see, the 2023 version of Brandon Ayuk in a Washington uniform, we haven't heard anything from him other than, going after his current employer versus telling us that he really wants to play football, talking about the knee in great shape, him being in great shape. Like you said, a lot of head up shots or neck up shots. And, that would be a better tack for him to take. But who are we to give advice? You just gave us some information, though, which I think I did not know. And I think it's been murky. You used the word, I think a lot's been murky about this, but that it's not just as easy as him showing up for the first day of training camp and forcing their hand. But still, why isn't he, if he wants to play football for Washington, why isn't he going through the process of filing for reinstatement?
Yeah, I think that's the question. And I think what the Niners learned and what people are learning about Ayuk is he's one of the most headstrong, stubborn people in the league. He's not Antonio Brown. He's not violent. He hasn't hurt anyone. He's hurting himself. He's hurting his career. And he's so prideful that he might not. It seems like he's already resigned himself to not playing football in 2026. In that video he posted a couple of days ago,
I thought that was a misspeak. I thought that was a misspeak.
Maybe it was. Or maybe it was a Freudian slip. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't even know where he is right now. And it seems like there's not really anyone in his circle who's advising him, even his agent. It seems like he's going rogue and posting this stuff off emotion. And he's going to do it every few days. He's just getting started.
Well, all right. So last question. By the way, we think he's in D.C. right now. Okay. Last question then for you. Like, if you were a fan of this team here, what would you want to see happen? Would you be out? Would the behavior be disqualifying, or would you still be interested?
I'd be interested. I mean, I'd be interested. Look at how Javon Kinlaw has flourished in Washington. He came from the Niners. He never was good. He didn't really fit in. He had knee issues. Now he's like one of the leads, always being interviewed over there. It seems like he's doing pretty well. It seems like he flourishes in that locker room. I think Ayuk would be so happy and grateful to play with Jaden Daniels. And I think if you get a motivated and happy Ayuk, which only one team in the league could get, and that's Washington Commanders, you have a chance to get a top 10 wide receiver, a guy who's better than Terry McLaurin, way better than Deebo Samuel. So, yeah, I think you guys should be all over it. I think he's going to play for you eventually. I think the Niners are going to have to cut him. ESPN's Nick Wagner, who covers the Niners, came out yesterday and said they should have cut him in March. I mean, really, what are they gaining from this? It's their right to be spiteful, but they're not going to trade him. And so what they're getting is all these distractions, all these videos, and they can ignore them, but they're very loud, and they don't make anyone look good. And eventually I think they're going to have to cut him just to see how much they can stomach.
I think the videos he could put out that could make them look worse are super positive videos about himself wanting desperately to play football again. Because I don't think these videos with, most people, I think the impression is he's crazy, he's spiteful, and he may not be all there mentally. And if I'm with you, by the way, on the player, and I've gotten in arguments with listeners and fans. I think at the end of 2023, he was better than Terry, and I think he was ascending, and I think he was, on the verge of becoming a true star in the league. But in terms of the Niners, like, again, if it were my team, Grant, I can only speak from my standpoint, because we went through this actually with Albert Hainsworth years ago and with Donovan McNabb, and everybody said, do the right thing, turn him loose. And really, the team didn't need to, give anybody, these players before. They ended up getting picks for Hainsworth and McNabb. They got a 6th rounder for McNabb that turned into Alfred Morris. Now, I agree with you. Nobody's going to trade for Brandon Ayuk. But why give him to Washington for a full training camp when you could give Washington Brandon Ayuk on September 1st or, 2 days before the season starts? I mean, that's the way I would view it.
Let me try to answer that with a question, if you allow me.
Sure.
What do you care if Washington gets Brandon Ayuk if his knee is torched?
Well, that's
and
different.
Toxic.
That's different.
Right?
If he's really toxic, not going to be the player that he was at the end of 2023, then I would definitely just move on at this point. I'm talking about if they believe that he can be that player.
But it's not just the knee. Like, it's also his attitude. It's his – I mean, that's been their biggest issue with him since 2021, the fact that he's not all in with their team, the fact that he wants to be a little bit on his own, the fact that he doesn't get along with the coach. I mean, if they think he's flat out toxic and all about himself, then get him off the team ASAP. Like, these videos aren't good, and let Washington figure out what you already know about him if you're that sure that he's a problem. But I think what Ayuk's saying, and maybe he's right, is that they don't really think Ayuk's a problem. They think he's good. They just didn't want to pay him.
Yeah. Well,
they never wanted to pay him.
I think you're. By the way, I'm gonna retweet it. You should read Grant's story, 21 steps on the deterioration of San Francisco's relationship with Brandon Ayuk. But I think even with the potential headache that he might be, at least perception wise, because you nailed it at the beginning. He was a significant reason why they made it to the Super Bowl. And so why give a team that we're going to play in week 6, which, by the way, he already sort of targeted as, I'm coming with the belt. I think that meant Monday night, October 19th in Santa Clara. But, look, I mean, I don't know. Chris Cooley, who I did a show with, Grant, for years, used to say about the noise outside the locker room. It never affected, these kinds of situations never affected the locker room or the organization like fans thought they did. Now, if he shows up and is a disruption, that's different, I think. But anyway.
That is different. I'm just saying, like 2 years ago, the Niners won 6 games. People don't really remember this, but it wasn't that long ago. And when they explained why they won 6 games, they talked a lot about distractions. That was the year that Ayuk held out the first time. Trent Williams held out in addition. And they're like, well, we never really got to focus on football. Last year they won 12 games, and they were talking about how focused they were, how they didn't have those issues. And now it seems like they're kind of inviting them back.
By the way, last one I lied. They should be good this year, right? I mean, if they're healthy, this should be in an incredible division with the Rams and the Seahawks. But how do you see the 49ers 2026 working out, assuming they are a healthy football team, which they weren't last year?
They should be good. I predicted they would win 10 games. They have a tougher schedule than last year. And I think last year having Robert Saleh was huge. He's a top 5 defensive coordinator, and he is a head coach. And Kyle Shanahan, for all of his strengths, is a little bit more of a play caller than a head coach. He's a little bit dour. He doesn't have a lot of energy. He really benefits from having someone like D'Amico or Saleh next to him. And while Raheem Morris does have that energy, I don't know that he's an elite defensive coordinator. And I don't know how good the Niners defense really is. They have Fred Warner, they have Nick Bosa, and that's kind of it. They're competing with teams like the Rams and the Seahawks that have great defenses. So I still think they're third in their division, but they're a good third.
Really appreciate the time. Great stuff. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Grant Cohn, everybody, covers the 49ers for Sports Illustrated, and I just retweeted the story that he wrote about 21 steps, chronological steps in the Brandon Ayuk 49ers saga. There's some interesting stuff. I think the interesting thing that Grant just, told us, and I assume it to be true, is that he just can't show up. He's got to file for reinstatement back into the league based on the list that he's on. But if he's really interested in playing football again, he needs to do that. And he needs to be able to force the 49ers' hand. How it plays out after he does that, who knows? But for him, he can't proceed if he wants to proceed until they release him. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Tonight at Regal Gallery Place in Chinatown, there is a documentary that will air called The Custodian, and it's about someone I know pretty well. Samu Qureshi has the largest collection of Redskins, Washington football team, Washington Commanders team memorabilia of anybody in the world. I've seen it. I've been through his warehouse where he has all of it. And someone has made a documentary about it. And I had him on my podcast the other day. And I think you're going to be interested in some of this stuff. So I started off by asking him, tell us what we're going to see. Now, this thing's sold out tonight, but there will be future airings of it. But I said, tell us what we're going to see with this documentary that airs tonight.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you having me. And it basically came about because I had sold my house and then I reset up the museum in a 5,000 square foot space in Rockville. And basically the owner of the building, when she took a look at the museum, she said, "Oh my God, Sammy, we got to do a documentary." Well, 2 days later, she happened to meet this amazing documentarian and filmmaker, Kala Malik. And next thing you know, they had convinced me to do this documentary. And I had set up the museum with the intention of hopefully getting to the team and having them purchase it so that they could create a Washington Football Hall of Fame and museum, as Mitch Rales had talked about in a podcast that he wanted that to be his legacy. And I just was very passionate about that whole idea, because that's what I've wanted to do my whole life. I've had a museum. I've had 25 players come through it. I've had 1,000 people see it, but I wanted it to be open to the public, and I wanted the team to, take over the legacy. So they decided to do a documentary, and boom, it's pretty cool. It's a 26-minute documentary.
A 26-minute documentary. It takes longer than 26 minutes to walk through that museum because I was there.
No, it took us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think it was 2.5 hours, and you had to cut it short. But it was great touring with you, Kevin, because you know the history of the team like I do, and you were just pointing to pieces, going like, "Hey, oh, that's from the Cardinals game in 1973."
Yeah, well, we both have the ability to do that. But so, what will people see? Tell me about the documentary. What's your favorite, part of it? What's the part that you wish were included that is not?
Well, to be honest, I would say there's visits from the 4 most recent players who visited the museum, former players, and 2 of them are age 89 and 90. And
who are the players?
So Carl Kammerer is age 90. He's in incredible condition mentally and physically, and he's actually coming to the premiere. And as is Leroy Butler, who is actually the very first black player to play for the team. People are going to scream and say, "No, it was Bobby Mitchell," but no, it was Leroy Butler. They were both on the team that first day in Dallas in 1962, but Leroy Butler played on the kickoff teams, and so he was the first guy out there on the field.
Wow!
And he's 89, and he's in the film, and he's coming to the film too. The old guys are coming out.
By the way, that's an interesting fact that I did not know. I mean, because of course I would have said, if you said who's the first black player to play for the franchise, I'd say, well, of course it's Bobby Mitchell. He integrated the team.
And everybody would say that.
Yeah.
But it's not true.
Yeah, well, but they were both, but Bobby Mitchell, so the kickoff team, it was the kickoff coverage team, not the return team that he was on.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So
he was on the return team as well. He was the fastest guy on the team. And, but he was on it because he was the fastest guy. They wanted him as like a safety, on the coverage in case anybody broke away.
Right.
So that's kind of a complicated.
And so that was the 62 opener at Dallas, right?
Correct.
Yeah. By the way, I'm looking at the box score of from that game. That game ended in a 35. Do you know what the final score of the game was?
Yeah, it was a 35-35 tie.
35-35 tie. Bobby Mitchell had 6 catches for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns, including an 81-yarder from Norm Snead in the fourth quarter that cut the Cowboys' lead from 35-21 to 35-28.
We should have never traded Norm.
We were 2 years away from Norm and Sonny getting dealt in that big trade, and one that obviously worked out much better for us. What else will people see that you're going to be excited for them to see?
Well, I wish there was more of the museum itself. It kind of got into a little bit too much about me and maybe my emotions with parting with the stuff. But seeing the museum on the big screen is pretty cool. And there's just so many amazing. When I set up the museum again, as you know, I set it up in exhibits to show to discuss the name controversy, to discuss the history of racism with the team. And in that one, I mean, it's called Racism and Integration. You see original newspapers from 1962, and we went from having won 1 game in 2 years to just exploding and winning, 5 games that year in 62, being 5-7. And Bobby Mitchell just lit it up. I mean, he's on the headline and photograph of him on virtually every next day newspaper of their games. So Leroy Butler visiting and seeing that, and his friend Rob. I mean, they had, that was really special. Brad Edwards and Chris Samuels also visit, and they're great as well. Let's just absolutely love those guys. It's a really well done film. I mean, it's I would say we saw a preview with my family and a couple friends, and people were pretty blown away by how well done it was. It was really, it was kind of a surprise to me because they filmed so many hours, and we were like, wow, they could have easily done a 90-minute documentary or a 2-hour documentary on it. But it's short and it's sweet, and it was special. It was cool. There was a lot of different scenes. I mean, I don't want to sit here and reel off every scene, but there was a lot of cool scenes in it. We did a lot of filming over the course of last year.
After people watch it, those that are lucky enough to be able to watch it on Friday night, how will people that won't be able to be there on Friday night get to see it?
Well, we've applied to a lot of cities' film festivals. So DC was the first one that we've gotten into, and but because it did so well, and there's a lot of people I know who wanted to buy tickets, and without even spreading the word, we're definitely planning on getting it into some more theaters, probably come fall, around the start of the season. So it'll be out there.
What's the state of the museum right now? Where are you with it? As much as you can tell everybody.
Unfortunately, my rents got raised a lot, and so I had to get out of the museum and I had to put it back all into storage. So it's in storage now. And honestly, I'm at a stage where, look, it's been, again, my lifetime dream to have it be a real museum, and really the only people who could do that, aside from maybe Matthew McConaughey, would be the team.
Yeah.
And so I really, I'm hoping that they will, they're just busy with operating the team, and and I think they've got just a great ownership and everything, but right now I think they're not really, it might not be a priority for them at this moment to start planning for a museum that they maybe would not put into, if they even do it. I mean, it's not like they've said they're going to do it, but it was Mitch Rales' dream, so I hope they would do it. And I just think again, I think it's so important to honor these guys. It's not just for the fans. I mean, it would be amazing for the fans, but also to honor all the great players who gave their lives to this team to make it, to make the history what it was. And we have, a really incredible history. I mean, there's definitely the good, the bad, and the ugly, but there were glory years, and there were several periods of glory years. And I would like, it's getting to the point where the guys from, there's hardly anybody left from the 60s. I mean, I got to visit with Sammy Baugh and, years ago, and, everybody from the 30s, 40s, and 50s is gone virtually. I mean, Sonny's still around. I guess he was, with the Eagles then. But there's a few guys. But, it's getting to the point. We just lost Monty Coleman, who's one of my absolute favorite guys, probably my most revered player in terms of what a great human being he was, and just a hilarious guy. And, breaks my heart. He lost his life in his 60s after a bout with cancer.
Yeah.
So I just want these guys to, to honor the team.
Well, hopefully, down the road when we near the opening of the new stadium, maybe at that point something can happen with it, and the team will be more interested in doing something with it. I think I've asked you this before, and I think you've been on with me before and maybe answered it, but I forget the answers, so I'm going to ask them again. Do you have a favorite item in the museum, and then B, what do you think the most valuable item in your museum is?
Favorite item in my museum is about the hardest question. I get asked that all the time, and it's really hard because I have about 20 of them. But I'd say my most valuable one is probably the 1937 team signed ball, which is in immaculate condition, and I've never known of another 1937 team signed ball. And I guarantee there's not one out there anywhere close to this condition. It looked like it was signed yesterday because it was preserved in a kid's wooden chest after it was given to him Christmas of 1937.
Wow.
And, it's every player signed their university as well because, of course, college football was so much more popular at that time than pro football. So they had to identify with their schools. And it's just it's a beautiful piece. Favorite pieces, and I've got Lombardi's cleats and Gibbs's headset, but I think probably some of my favorite pieces are some of the letters that I have, historic letters that were like correspondence between George Preston Marshall and Corinne Griffith, who I think I identify in the film as being like the most important woman in the history of the NFL, because she not only convinced George to move the team to Washington, she wrote the amazing song. She created the halftime show, which basically evolved into the Super Bowl show. I mean, nobody had these halftime shows back then. And she also wrote the first book ever on the team, and it sold better than any book for, I'm sure, at least another 30 years or 25 years.
All right. Well, good luck with this on Friday night. I'm happy for you. I can't wait to see it. Hopefully, I'll have a chance to see it soon. But keep me posted on everything.
All right, Kevin. Great talking to you. Take care.
Samu Qureshi with his documentary. I mean, his collection of team memorabilia is amazing. The team would really, with the new stadium opening in 2030, if they do what other teams have done, which is create a museum somewhere near or attached to the stadium, there's only one person with the kind of stuff that you'd be able to create a museum around. Literally, that's how extensive his collection is. It's 50 years of collecting stuff for him. All right, real quickly on the follow-up to the Grant Cohn conversation that we had. A lot of you, my guy Kevin Arlington, now I want Ayuk. Kyle is ridiculous, overtly plays favorites. Dumb, great interview. Yeah, that's not my takeaway from that. This from Dwayne. Shanahan's the absolute worst. Give me Ayuk now after that conversation. That wasn't my takeaway. I think Grant was excellent because he laid out so much of the detail. This is best case for Ayuk from my standpoint, based on the conversation with Grant. Two culpable groups. The bottom line is they had a reason for feeling the way they did. By the way, coaches play favorites all the time. If you play by the rules, you're a favorite. If you don't play by the rules in these organizations, you're not necessarily a favorite. Now, what I think was the worst piece of information that we got from Grant is that after he injured and tore up and shredded his knee, that they were looking to trade him. That is not a real great reading of the room in terms of how the player will feel when he finds out. That seems wrong to me. Now, maybe the relationship was, I think what Grant also spelled out is the organization was kind of mixed on signing him and keeping him. And Kyle, more than anybody, seemed to be the guy that actually really wanted to sign him and really liked him as the player, and went to them when they were going to trade him to the Steelers and said no. Yeah, complicated for sure. What he's got to do is file for that reinstatement and then show up for training camp and force their hand somehow. But it sounds like filing for that reinstatement is just the first step to getting him back onto the field. This will be an interesting next few weeks, really starting at the end of next month, assuming nothing happens in the interim. Have a great weekend, everybody. Back on Monday. Chris is next.